Hey, my name is Craig, and I'm an author, and I want to tell you a little bit about why I started writing in the first place and what I did with this book that maybe is a little different. So, first off, I started writing for the same reason I think a lot of authors start writing is that I love stories. I've been obsessed with stories for years and years. I would find myself in my day job being able to relate virtually anything and everything situational to a storyline that I had read, a movie I had seen, because my mind just is a reservoir of stories. Why? I don't know. But it's one of the reasons I started writing was that I had all these stories and all these storylines in my head, and I wanted to read a book that was what I wanted it to be. In other words, not every author was following a storyline or telling the tale the way that my brain digested properly or preferred. Let's put it that way. So I came up with what is now Stickiness and Stones. And that was my first novel where I said, hey, I want to write a hero's journey, and I wanted to make a magic system that is based on something physical and something real, something that is based on a logic that is something anybody can follow. Where it's part of the Resin Chronicles, and resin is a magical substance that dictates who has magic powers and who doesn't. So it's very, very physical, very tangible, and the density of one's resin core in their body dictates how much power they have. So again, it's linear, it's logical, it's built like that. It's not, yeah, I'm not going to even touch on some of the other magic systems out there. Anyway, so that got me into writing, and honestly, I started writing about maybe 9 months before COVID hit. Maybe it was a year before COVID hit. I can tell you I've been writing now for roughly 7 years. So I guess it was around the time COVID hit, a little bit before. I found myself working from home, and I said, you know what? I've always dreamed of writing. It's now or never. Let's get started. And I took what used to be my commute time. I used to have a an hour morning commute, an hour and a half commute in the afternoon, and I pushed that into writing, and that was an easy transition. And so one book became two, became three, became four. And one of the things I did was when I got to the end of book three, my brain said, you know what? I want to explore how the world that I created, the Resin Chronicles universe, how did that come into being? And I also want to write it from a much more mature perspective. So these first three books are not immature per se, but they're definitely not as adult oriented as Born of the Gods. So I wanted to stay within the same universe because I'd already created the Resin universe, and I already had created the magic system for the Resin Chronicles. And so that led me to saying, hey, I want to stay within the same universe, but I want a different character set. And I want to be more mature as far as the subject matter and whether or not I use foul language, whether or not there's implications of sex and drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. And so that led me to create Origins, which Born of the Gods is the first book in Origins. And the second one I'm going to release later this summer is going to be called Time of the Gods. Now, Born of the Gods, very different journey. So if you're still with me in this, I'm going to yap about this for a few minutes. Born of the Gods is based on the premise of how do you get to where the Resin Chronicles is here, where you already have several magical devices and politics are already established and those sorts of things. So how did it come to be like that? And so the premise I started with in Born of the Gods was, hey, what if we are still within the Resin Chronicles universe, the magic systems and rules still apply, but yet you only have a handful of people that have magic? And then I thought to myself, what if those people that have magic are the only ones in that realm that have had magic for hundreds of years? What would happen? My brain said, well, they'd be revered as gods. And then what would happen if they got into a scuffle and one of them decided, you know what, I've had enough. And she bows out. She doesn't bow out by just, walking off into the desert. She explodes. She takes out her entire city with her. But on her way out, she decides to gift one individual with magic. She decides to gift one individual with a resin core that allows her to heal. It just so happens that's Arleia, who's the protagonist of Born of the Gods. And the start of the book is very much the phoenix rising from the ashes. Arleia is healing in Arleia heals after the cataclysmic explosion of her goddess. She has no idea why. She's only ever been a high priestess. She thinks she's cursed. And so that's the premise of how Born of the Gods starts. And it's a very mature subject matter, or a very mature premise, because I don't shy away from what it takes to shed one's beliefs from what they were. It's something that I think many of us have gone through in our lives, especially, I wrote this to be a much more mature subject matter book. And if you've ever gone through a time in your life where you're suffering through your beliefs, am I going to stay where I am? Am I going to go somewhere else? What if you discover that all the things you believed in were not what you were led to believe? What if you discovered that a lot of your beliefs were based on falsehoods? Where would that leave you? And so this book goes straight there, as Arleia struggles with the discovery that her goddess wasn't actually a god, that none of these individuals that are, resin carriers, the people that have magic, are gods. So this book is very much, Born of the Gods is false gods. And Arleia is thrust into that world of now being one of them, but she doesn't understand her powers. She doesn't understand how to use them. She doesn't even know that she really has magic. She thinks she's been cursed. And so about halfway through the book, you get to that area where she now has a decision to make. Does she move forward shedding her old beliefs, or does she stick to her guns? And I'm not going to give anything away, but that gets you about to the halfway point of this book. And that was the premise that I wrote it from, was I wanted to write something much more mature. I wanted to write something that was near and dear to my heart, because I look at beliefs and, as a story lover, as an author, as someone who's, participated in organized religion and not, both sides, what does that look like for somebody when they're struggling with their own belief set? But even more severe, what does that look like for somebody who's struggling with their belief set and it turns out that everything they knew was false, that everything they believed in and dedicated their entire life to was built upon a lie? What does that look like? What does that person go through? What's their struggle? And that's how Arleia evolves through the book. So I'm not giving anything away. I'll tell you the last line of the prologue is, I wasn't always a goddess, but I'll tell you how it happened. So that gives you a brief glimpse of the fact that the book is about Arleia and her journey from priestess to goddess. So that's it. That's Born of the Gods. And then Time of the Gods, which is the sequel to this one, is a whole nother journey for Arleia. She gets herself into a real pickle in that one, and has things like magical addiction stuck in it. So again, I told you, it gets more mature, gets darker. I don't write lots of gore, but there is some very visceral descriptions in this. I also try to keep my stories moving. I don't really appreciate authors that get so flowery and metaphorical that it can lose you and make you wonder what you read. So I like to keep my stories moving at a fair pace. This book is about 328 pages long, so it's not super long, but it keeps moving the whole time. So anyway, that's my spiel. Again, my name's Craig, the author of the Resin Chronicles universe. Born of the Gods is my latest creation. The sequel to this one's coming later this summer. And really hope you enjoy my work. I hope it brings you some pleasure and insight into, how others might be dealing with this sort of thing. So there you go. Have a good one. Bye.